All right, the Dynasty, the New England Patriots 10-part docuseries on Apple TV. I finished it over the weekend. For those who know me, I am a big sports fan. In fact, I do a football podcast with a former NFL player. So this one is definitely something that I felt like I can sink my teeth into. And I'm probably going to go a little long on this review because I feel like there's a lot of layers to talk about and discuss. Now, full disclosure, I am not a New England Patriots fan, though I do recognize Tom Brady as the GOAT, go blue, and it was a pretty interesting look inside the Patriots dynasty from 2000, 2001, all the way up until 2020 when Brady went to the Bucs. Now, one of my immediate positive takeaways was that it was really cool to hear from a lot of the different role players and kind of co-stars to the Brady, Belichick, and Robert Kraft sort of power trio, if you will. You know, they had interviews with Matthew Slater and Willie McGinnis and, Teddy Bruschi, and even going back to guys like Drew Bledsoe, which was, I think, one of my favorite kind of parts from the early episodes was how much they kind of delved into the fact that Drew Bledsoe was really the original kind of franchise guy when Robert Kraft bought the team in 1996. And ultimately, kind of his transition from being the guy to all of a sudden getting injured and then Brady becoming the man and then ultimately going to Super Bowl. Now, I'm glad they also covered the fact that Drew Bledsoe did play in the AFC Championship game that eventually led them to the Super Bowl because Brady was hurt in that game. Now, moving forward, I was actually fairly impressed with how they covered Spygate. I thought I at least picked up a couple things that I didn't know about it. From being around back then and like just kind of remembering the news coverage and all the hysteria of it. I thought they did a pretty good job of kind of covering how the media and the outside world, felt about the Patriots. I also found Robert Kraft in particular to be particularly forthright. I thought he was pretty honest about his feelings about the different, parts of the dynasty and the kind of inner workings of the relationship between Brady and Belichick and how Belichick coached the team and kind of managed the team and his kind of interpersonal relationship with Belichick. And I also thought they covered, and I was kind of surprised by this, to be honest. I think they covered the Aaron Hernandez saga really well. There's a really good documentary on Netflix I'm sure a lot of you have seen about the Aaron Hernandez murder and all this, the crazy background of his life. But I was actually pretty surprised with how in-depth they were willing to go on the Aaron Hernandez saga, considering this is essentially a Patriot-produced docuseries. Now, my few issues with this docuseries are, one, I definitely do not think they covered the Super Bowl losses well enough. In particular, the two times that they lost to the Giants. They definitely spent a decent amount of time on the 2007 Super Bowl when they had Randy Moss and they were looking at the perfect record and all that stuff. But they completely glazed over 2011. And I just don't really think that they really touched on that. And also other pivotal games during that time when they were kind of down for Patriot standards and they weren't contending for Super Bowls. I really wish they would have went a little bit deeper on some of those critical games, kind of like in the early to mid 2000s, before they kind of started to go back up for those last three rings that they got before Brady ultimately left the Patriots. But I think my biggest irritant with this whole docuseries was Bill Belichick was just not giving us anything. I mean, he was basically talking to the camera and talking to the director like he was at the podium. We're on Cincinnati. Like, he might as well have been doing that shit. He really didn't offer anything. And I think what was particularly telling was that he either wouldn't speak on things or he would completely deflect responsibility on any kind of misstep that he had over the course of 20 years. The biggest one of all was the fact that he didn't put in corner Malcolm Butler during the Super Bowl, which many believe was a costly mistake, potentially so costly that it lost him the Super Bowl. And he just couldn't bring himself to admit that it was a mistake, like it was just going to ruin his legacy. He wouldn't speak on it. He was like borderline defensive about it, and he just kind of had that vibe for a lot of things. And it's interesting when you watch kind of the footage of him at the podium pre-Spygate versus post-Spygate. After Spygate happened, he was a lot different with how he spoke to the media and just how he kind of like interacted with anybody outside of the organization. If you watch Belichick pre Spygate, he actually was like a little bit more communicative and like he would elaborate a lot more when somebody would ask him a question. And even to this day, he's gone from the team. He's basically out of football at this point, and he still just there was multiple things that he either wouldn't speak on. Hell, there were several things that they didn't even. Maybe they even filmed it and they couldn't use it because it was unusable with some of the other big events. But he just was really not a willing participant in this documentary. Anyway, I've been yapping. You guys let me know what you think. I'm just as a football fan, I enjoy kind of going back to all this stuff and sort of seeing like this sort of like rise and fall. Kind of has, sort of Game of Thrones vibes to it, I guess. But you let me know what you think and definitely make sure to check it out. I do think it's worth the watch. I'm going to give it probably a 7.5 out of 10. But let me know what you think in the comments.